Your favorite hunting caliber has a hole in it, a specific job it can't do. And the round most of you swear by fails the exact moment it matters most. 5 calibers. Every one of them is somebody's one true love. 4 of them break when you ask them to do everything. 1 doesn't. Here's the test, and it's not a paper test. It's the one hunt you'll actually plan your life around. 1 rifle, 1 caliber. That's the rule. And yeah, I already hear you. Nobody with a real safe owns 1 rifle. You've got a deer gun and an elk gun and something for the truck. I know, so do I. But humor the thought for 20 minutes because the exercise tells you something real. Which single cartridge has the fewest excuses? If a house fire only let you grab 1, which one walks out the door with you? So here's the scenario. This fall, you're in thick East Coast timber, still hunting whitetail, shots under 100 yards, brush everywhere. Come spring, you're flat on your belly in Wyoming, glassing a pronghorn across an open flat, and the shot is 300, maybe 400 yards, wind pushing the whole time. And come September, you're in coastal Alaska, and the thing in front of you at 60 yards weighs as much as a small car and does not care how good your morning was. 1 rifle has to cover all 3. Most calibers handle 2 of those and fall apart on the 3rd. Let's find the one that doesn't. Number 5, the .308 Winchester. And I want to be straight with you up front because the .308 is going to finish last on this list, and it is still one of the best hunting rounds ever built. That's not a contradiction. It's last for one specific reason, and we'll get there. But everything before that reason is a love letter. The .308 showed up in the early 1950s as the civilian side of the 7.62 NATO. That military DNA gave it 2 gifts that never stopped paying off. First, you can find the ammo anywhere. Gas stations, hardware stores, the one shop in a town with a single stoplight. When I worked the counter, .308 was the round I never worried about keeping in stock because it moved and it came in from everybody. Federal, Winchester, Hornady, the budget stuff, the premium stuff. Second, the rifles. You want a .308 and a bolt gun, a semi-auto, a lever, a pump. It exists in every price range from every maker. It is the most available centerfire .30 caliber on earth. The ballistics are honest. You're pushing a .30 caliber bullet, usually 150 to 180 grains, around 2,700 feet per second. And here's the part nobody gives it enough credit for: the recoil. It's the softest kicker on this entire list, somewhere around 13 to 15 foot-pounds in a normal hunting rifle. That matters more than people admit, because a rifle you can shoot well beats a rifle that beats you up every single time. You can put 60 rounds through a .308 on a Saturday and still want to keep going. For deer, hogs, and black bear inside 300 yards, it does the job with 0 drama for the least money out of the widest selection of guns on the market. If 90% of your hunting is whitetail and pigs, you could stop the video here and never feel cheated. So what's the fatal flaw? Reach, and weight of punch at distance. The .308 is a short-action cartridge, smaller case, smaller powder column, and physics doesn't negotiate. At 500 yards, a typical 180 grain load is down around 1,300 foot-pounds, and that's the number that starts the argument. Because by the time you stretch it out past 350, 400 yards, it's running low on what elk and moose demand to go down, clean and ethical. Now, and this is where I have to be careful because the internet loves to fight about numbers, the how much energy does an elk need figure is a rule of thumb, not a law of physics. 1,500 foot-pounds gets thrown around as the elk minimum, but it's a convention, not a commandment. Guides have dropped elk with a lot less, and shot placement beats raw energy every day of the week. But as a general planning number, once the .308 is out past 400 yards on something the size of an elk, you're at the edge of what most people consider fair. And the edge of fair is exactly where you don't want your only rifle living. And that Alaska brown bear at the end of our test? The .308 can do it with a heavy premium bullet up close. It's been done plenty of times, and there are records of big coastal bears taken cleanly with one well-placed shot from an .08. But it's the thin end of the wedge. It's the minimum, with no margin left over. And margin is the whole point of picking one rifle for the worst thing you'll ever face with it. That's the whole case against it, not that it's weak. That as your one rifle for everything, it's the one that runs out of room first. It's the most trustworthy tool in the shed, right up until the shed has to cover a grizzly and a long Wyoming flat. That's why it sits at 5. Number 4, the 270 Winchester. If the 308 runs out of reach, the 270 was practically invented to fix that exact problem. This one's pure Americana. Take a 30-06 case, neck it down to a 277 bullet, and you get a trajectory so flat it almost feels like cheating. A 130 grain bullet leaves the muzzle north of 3,000 feet per second. At 400 yards, you're barely holding over. For mule deer, pronghorn, and open country whitetail, that Wyoming leg of our test, the 270 is a surgical instrument, and the recoil's still gentle, a touch under the 308 even, so just about anybody can shoot it well. There's a name attached to this round you should know, because it matters for what comes next. Jack O'Connor. For decades, he was the shooting editor at Outdoor Life, and he built the legend of the 270, took something like 36 species with it, all over the world, elk and moose, and even a couple of grizzlies. Generations of hunters dropped their first buck with a 270 because O'Connor told them to, and he wasn't wrong. It reaches, it's accurate, it's on every shelf, and the ammo's cheap. So here's where it breaks, and I'm going to let O'Connor himself break it because it's his round. The 270 tops out around 150 grains in factory bullets in that skinny 277 diameter. That's plenty for deer-sized game all day long. But when you need deep, straight-line penetration on a bull moose, or you need to break through the heavy shoulder bone on a coastal brown bear, that light, narrow bullet becomes a real liability. It doesn't carry the heavy, high sectional density projectiles that punch through thick muscle and bone on an animal that weighs as much as a motorcycle. And this isn't me talking. O'Connor, the man who made the round famous, the man who hunted with it for 40 years, wrote plainly that it was, his words, not a good choice for stopping an Alaska brown bear. When the #1 salesman for a cartridge tells you where its limit is, believe him. So the 270 is a precision machine for the first 2 legs of our test, and arguably the best of the whole list at the Wyoming flat. But precision without enough bullet is a problem when the animal in front of you can eat you. It can't reliably anchor the biggest, toughest game on the continent. Fatal flaw. Number 4. Number 3. The 7mm Remington Magnum. Now we're into serious hardware. When Remington dropped this one in 1962 alongside the Model 700, it changed how Americans thought about reaching out. The 7 Mag takes everything the 270 does well and adds muscle behind it. You're launching bullets from 140 to 175 grains. The sweet spot's around 150, 160, screaming out past 3,000, 3,100 feet per second. And here's the 7mm's real party trick, the thing the number chasers love. The bullets are efficient. High ballistic coefficient, which is just a fancy way of saying they hold their speed and buck the wind better than a fatter bullet of the same weight. That skinny 7mm slug slips through the air where a 30 caliber bullet of the same weight is already slowing down. At 500 yards, a good 160 grain 7 mag load is still carrying well over 1,500 foot-pounds, right at that elk threshold, way out where the 308 tapped out 200 yards ago. This is the round you pick when you know the shot's going to be across a canyon in Wyoming or across a basin in Montana, when the wind's coming sideways and you need the bullet to fight through it instead of getting shoved off course. It shoots flatter than the 270, fights wind better, and hits harder way out there. On the long Wyoming leg of our test, it's arguably the most capable round on the list. For elk, moose, and big-bodied mule deer in open country, the 7 Mag is a genuine top-tier performer. On paper, it might be the best all-arounder on this whole list. Plenty of hunters would put it at number 1 and make a real argument. So why is it at 3? 2 reasons, and they're both practical rather than ballistic. First, recoil. You're looking at somewhere north of 20 foot-pounds of kick, a real step up from the short action rounds. And a lot of hunters, especially the ones who don't practice as much as they should, will build a flinch over a box of that. Now, I'll be fair, because a bunch of you are already typing. A muzzle brake or a suppressor changes this conversation a lot, and if you hand load or run a can, the 7 Mag gets a lot friendlier. But out of the box, in a light mountain rifle, it kicks, and a rifle you flinch with is a rifle that misses. Second, and this one nobody likes to say out loud, cost and availability. You are not grabbing 7 mag at a gas station. You're paying a premium per box. And when there's any kind of ammo crunch, Magnum hunting rounds are the first thing to vanish off the shelf and the last to come back. I watched it happen from behind the counter more than once. For a dedicated Western rifle, the 7 mag is incredible. But as your only rifle, the one that also has to make a quick Saturday trip to the deer stand where you'd like cheap ammo and a relaxed afternoon, it's more specialized than the job needs. That's the flaw. Number 2, the 300 Winchester Magnum. This is the sledgehammer of the group. Winchester brought it out in 1963, a year after the 7 mag, and it went on to become the most popular 30 caliber Magnum ever made. There's a reason it's in so many safes. It takes the 30 caliber bullet, same diameter as the 308 and the .06, and launches it out of a bigger belted Magnum case with a serious charge of powder behind it. A 180 grain bullet moving around 3,000 feet per second. A 200 grain load still pushing past 2,800. At 500 yards, this thing is still packing close to 2,000 foot-pounds. That's roughly what the 308 had at the muzzle, being delivered a quarter-mile downrange. That is a massive amount of authority delivered a long way off, and it does it with a bullet heavy enough and wide enough to break down anything on the continent. This is the round Alaska guides actually trust for brown bear. This is what serious elk hunters carry when the shot might be 400 yards across a canyon in ugly wind. And here's the thing that makes it a real contender for number 1, not just a runner-up. The 300 mag matches the .06's bullet range. It'll run everything from a 150 up to a 220, same as our winner. So it's not just powerful, it's versatile and powerful. If your honest answer to what will I hunt most is elk and bear in long open country, a lot of experienced hunters will tell you to stop right here and buy the 300. And they're not wrong. This is the closest call on the whole list. So why isn't it number 1? One reason, and it's the same reason the 7 mag sits below where its ballistics say it should. It's too much gun for most of your actual hunting life. The recoil is the heaviest on this list. Call it 30 foot-pounds, give or take, which is right at the edge of punishing in a normal weight rifle. Most shooters cannot run 40 rounds of full-power 300 mag across a bench without their groups falling apart and a flinch creeping in. And I'll say the fair part again, louder, because you earned it. A muzzle brake or a good suppressor tames this round a lot, and if you shoot it enough to be truly comfortable with it, the 300 mag might genuinely be your answer. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game says it plainly. They'd rather you show up with an .06 you shoot well than a shiny new Magnum you've only fired enough to sight in, because the rifle you flinch with can't save you when it counts. Then there's cost. Magnum ammo runs you real money a box, and unlike the 308 and the .06, there's no cheap surplus or bulk practice ammo to fall back on, so range days add up fast, which means in practice people shoot their Magnums less, which means they shoot them worse. And here's the stat that frames the whole thing, because it's the honest data and not a gut feeling. When you actually tally up where hunters take their shots, the median lands right around 150 yards. Roughly a third of all shots are inside 100. About 2/3 fall inside 200. Only about 1 in 20 stretches past 400. Most American hunting is whitetail and hogs, close in timber or over a field edge. Running a 300 Win Mag for that is like keeping a dump truck to do the grocery run. It'll get the milk home. You're just paying for it in fuel and wear and a sore shoulder every single trip. There's one real exception buried in that data, and it's fair to name it: pronghorn. The antelope on our Wyoming leg is the one animal where the average shot really does stretch out past 250 yards, and that's exactly the hunt where a flatter, harder-hitting round earns its keep. But one leg of the test doesn't make a Magnum your everyday rifle. The 300 mag dominates the top end of our test, the bear, the long canyon. It's the best on this list, at the hardest single leg. But if you're keeping only one rifle, you need the one you'll enjoy shooting enough to stay sharp with all year. For most people, that disqualifies it by a hair. Number 2. Number 1. The 30-06 Springfield. Let's line up the wreckage first, because the case for the winner is really just the sum of everyone else's fatal flaw. The 308 runs out of reach. The 270 runs out of bullet. The 7 mag is expensive, and it kicks. The 300 mag beats you up so badly you stop practicing. And the .06? The .6 doesn't have a disqualifying weakness. That's the whole argument. It's not number one because it's the best at any single thing on this list. It isn't. It's number one because it's the only round here that never completely fails you at any leg of the test. The military adopted it in 1906. That's what the .6 means, the year. And it's been quietly proving this exact point for more than a century. The case is longer than the .308, which lets you push the same 30 caliber bullets a good bit faster, 100 to 200 feet per second on top. A 150 grain load runs around 2,900, 3,000. A heavy 180 sits around 2,700. Recoil lands around 20, 21 foot-pounds. Firm, but completely manageable without a break, and a long way south of the Magnums. But here's what actually separates the .6 from everything else on this list. The bullet range. And this is the number I want you to remember, because it's the entire ball game. Factory 30-06 ammo runs from about 110 grains all the way up to 220. You can load it light, 110, a 125, for coyotes and varmints without turning them inside out. You can run a 150 or a 165 soft point that is flat out deadly on deer and hogs and antelope. And when it's time for the big, mean stuff, elk, moose, brown bear, you step up to a 200 or a 220 grain bonded bullet that penetrates deep and straight through heavy bone. No other round on this list gives you that whole spread in one chamber. The 270 can't go heavy enough. The 308 can't push the heavy ones fast enough. The Magnums can push them, sure, but they punish you for it and empty your wallet doing it. That's the reveal, if you want to call it one. It's not a secret, and it's not a scandal. It's just arithmetic that's been sitting in plain sight since your great-grandfather's war. One case, from 110 grains to 220, covering a prairie dog to a coastal grizzly, out of a rifle you can buy anywhere, in any action, at any budget, feeding ammo you can find in any small-town store in America. Before I give you the loadout, do me a favor. If this is the round in your safe right now, tell me in the comments what you've taken with it. I read them, and the .6 stories are the best ones on this channel. Let me put real numbers on the three legs because that's the test we set. At 500 yards, a 180 grain .6 is still carrying somewhere over 1,600 foot-pounds. That's enough for elk, out past where most people have any business shooting one. On the Wyoming pronghorn flat, a 150 at 3,000 feet per second shoots flat enough that your holdover at 400 yards is manageable. Not quite the 270 or the 7 mags laser trajectory, but well inside what a competent shooter puts to use. And up close, on that Alaska bear, a 220 grain premium bullet is a legitimate stopper. This isn't me guessing. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game says it outright, that an .6 loaded with a 200 or 220 grain premium bullet will do the job on a brown bear with good shot placement. When the state that manages the biggest bears on the continent signs off on your one rifle, that's the endorsement that counts. And here's the quieter thing the .6 gives you that never shows up on a ballistic chart. On a Saturday afternoon, you can put 60 rounds through it and still want to keep shooting. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. Because the rifle you practice with is the rifle you shoot well, and the rifle you shoot well is the one that puts the bullet where the animal needs it, which, say it with me, matters more than any energy number on any of these 5. The Magnums win the spec sheet. The .6 wins the season. Now, before the comments fill up, and they will, let me deal with the rounds that aren't on this list, because you're right that they exist, and you're right that some of them are excellent. This was a 5-round bracket built around one specific test. One rifle, everything, whitetail to grizzly. That test is what keeps certain great cartridges off the stage. The 243 and the 25-06. Superb deer and antelope rounds, soft shooting, flat, a joy to carry. They're not on the list because they're light for a big bull moose or a brown bear. They're specialists at the small end of our test, not all-arounders across it. The 6.5 Creedmoor, which I know 1,000 of you are waiting for me to mention, genuinely good, efficient, easy on the shoulder, and it'll do most of this test well. It lands in almost the same conversation as the 270 and the 308. Excellent for the first 2 legs, light on bullet weight for the bear at the end. On the other end, the 338 Win Mag and the big 35s, those are fantastic bear and moose medicine, but they're too much gun and too much recoil to be the round you also take whitetail hunting close, which puts them in the same box as the 300 mag, only more so. And the lever guns, the 45-70, the 30-30, magnificent in thick brush. Exactly what you want when the shot's under 100 yards in the timber, but they run out of reach on the Wyoming flat before the .6 even warms up. Every one of those is a better tool than the .6 at one leg of the test. Not one of them covers all three. That's the difference between a specialist and a one and done, and this whole video was about the one and done. So here's your loadout. If the .6 is the one rifle you walk out of the fire with, for deer, hogs, and antelope, the bulk of what most of you actually hunt, a 150 to 165 grain bullet, a good controlled expansion soft point, and you're covered from the deer stand to the far side of a Wyoming flat. Step up to a 180 grain premium for elk and moose, because now you want that deeper penetration on heavier bone. And for the brown bear at the end of the world, a 200 or 220 grain bonded or partition bullet, the kind built to hold together and drive straight through. 3 boxes of ammo, 1 rifle, every animal on the continent. That's the whole pitch, and it's been true for 120 years. One more time, because it's the honest core of all of this. None of these 5 is a bad round. The 308 is trustworthy and cheap. The 270 is a flat shooting classic. The 7 mag reaches out and hits hard. The 300 mag is the closest thing to a Magnum that does everything. Pick any one of them for the hunting you do, and you will not be poorly armed. But the question wasn't, which one is good? The question was, which one alone never leaves you holding the wrong rifle? 4 of them have a leg of the test where they come up short. The .6 doesn't. It's not the flashiest. It never was. It's just the one that's never wrong. That's the list. 5 calibers, 4 fatal flaws, and 1 round from 1906 that outlives every trend that's tried to replace it. So now I want to hear it. If you could keep exactly 1 rifle and 1 caliber for the rest of your hunting life, what are you picking, and what have you already put down with it? I read every single one of these, and the argument in the comments is half the reason to be here. If this breakdown helped you think through your next rifle, you know what to do. And if there's a round you think should have knocked one of these 5 off the list, make the case down below. I'm listening. Stay safe out there and shoot straight.